Hello, degenerates, and all you freaks and geeks and weird people that frequent the internet. Welcome to the War Zone. I'm Scruffy, and this is Skruffytalez. So, in our video today, we are gonna explore basically Ukraine's official stance on Pokrovsk, where they more or less flat out claim that they are in control of Pokrovsk, and any Russian information saying otherwise is bullshit. And we're also going to take a look at why Ukraine has chosen to fight at Pokrovsk, how the Ukrainians justified reason to hold on to Pokrovsk and Mironarad and not just abandoning these locations. And there are also some rumors on what the Russians are up to. And then we're going to spend a lot of time looking at maps and talking a bunch of nonsense because I'm recording this late at night. And, it's difficult keeping your thoughts together when you're a bit tired. I think you'll notice that when we're going through the maps. Anyway, that's going to have to be it. Let's get this show on the road. So we're going to start off with some official statements made by Ukraine here, Zelensky and others, and Syrskyi included and stuff like that. So what we're seeing here is Ukrainian claims 25,000 Russian losses in October, and Pokrovsk is the focal point, so it has turned into a massive graveyard for the Russians. In October, around 25,000 Russian soldiers were confirmed killed on video. So all the drones and everything, they've gone through all of that and counted 25,000 individual Russian soldiers being ended. And then they add, you have an additional 2,000 to 3,000 estimated casualties not captured on camera. I guess if you see a vehicle blow up, you can add in 2 to 3 crew. You don't see them, dying, but you can expect them dying being in the vehicle and stuff like that. And as it says, the highest monthly toll since the start of the full-scale invasion in February. On November 7th, so a couple of days old at this point. And here it says most of the losses occurred on the Pokrovsk front, where Russian forces launched 220 assaults in recent days using heavy equipment. And we've seen this in other reporting that Russia has lost 34% of all their casualties in 2025 in the Pokrovsk operational area. So a third of the 25,000 deaths have happened at Pokrovsk, and that's the entire front line. A third of all casualties along the entire front line on a very, very small battle space at Pokrovsk. Just incredible. So the Russians are doubling down. We know they're moving more and more resources over there. And I think we saw another news report the other day that a third of all of Russia's assaults in total along the front line were recorded at Pokrovsk, right? So along the entire length of the front line, a third of all Russian combat actions took place in the Pokrovsk operational area, and they've lost a third of all their casualties in that same area. So Pokrovsk is obviously the main fight, perhaps the biggest fight yet in the entire war. And Russia has so far lost in total 100,000 casualties at Pokrovsk in 2025 alone. And they haven't taken Pokrovsk yet, even despite what all the Vatnik are saying. We're going to go into that. And related to that, here we have other news from Zelensky and Syrskyi. Measures are being taken to block the enemy who is trying to infiltrate and accumulate in the city of Pokrovsk. Active resistance continues against attempts by enemy infantry groups to establish themselves. At the same time, work is underway to strengthen the flanks of the defenses of Pokrovsk-Mironarad agglomeration, ensuring and protecting logistical routes. And then they talk about Dobropilya. I think this is the Boykivka pocket that they're talking about. where Ukraine is assaulting and advancing, anywhere from 100 to 700 meters, depending on the situation. But here is what is interesting. Ukraine has come out and said 3 or 4 times that it's only 300 to 350 Russians operating within Pokrovsk itself, sneaking around, ambushing Ukrainians here and there, and then sneaking off again into the night or whatever, right? Going into hiding. So the town is not overrun. It's been infiltrated by sabotage units that can ambush Ukrainians, that can call in artillery and drones and airstrikes if they find a building where the Ukrainians are hiding in and what have you. So 300 to 400 Russians within Pokrovsk. That is what Ukraine keeps repeating, and that is why they moved in special forces units to hunt down these small Russian groups, 3 to 4, maybe 6 men strong, that are hiding in basements here and there, and then you try and hunt them down and what have you. So that is what Ukraine keeps repeating, that they're still in Pokrovsk, and it's only a small number of Russians, comparatively speaking, that have made it inside the city. And they're working on opening up the logistics where they are ambushing and what have you. Okay, moving on. And on top of that, we get this from the Korn Group, a famous drone unit within the Ukrainian military, talking a bit about why Ukraine is mounting this defense at Pokrovsk and Myrnorod. We've talked about it before. We've compared it to Stalingrad, a city where you could actually lure the enemy into the city and grind them down and have a big decisive battle that has a lasting impact on the war and actually will affect the outcome of the war. Others have compared it, and that was my comparison, for that reason that Ukraine, I thought, or still think, Ukraine will use Pokrovsk and Myrnorod to tie up Russian resources, grind them down, and that this will become a battle that has such a profound impact on the Russian military that it, in the end, will have a decisive outcome on the war at large. And others have compared this battle to the Battle of Waterloo, where a small farm became the focal point for the French army trying to take this small farm, that it was drawing in resources from the rest of the battlefield, slowing down the French advance and allowing the Allies to continue the fight and overcome the French army, because they held one small farm in the middle of the battlefield at Waterloo. Which, the end result is the same thing. You have this massive front line, but this one small battle is drawing in all the resources, grinding down Russian assets, and this gives Ukraine the chance to win essentially, even though Pokrovsk will eventually fall, of that I'm certain. But on the grand scale of things, it will be a Pyrrhic victory for the Russians, to such an extent that it will have a huge impact on the outcome of the war, giving Ukraine a chance to actually win the war in the end, thanks to this one battle. So, rambling, back to the Korn Group, what they're saying, and I agree with what they're saying, and this is basically what I've been saying all along, isn't it? So let's see what the Korn Group are saying. Because you all know, we're not going to mention names, but the dipshits that are going, it's a disaster. Anyway, for those who see this as betrayal or consider the decision wrong, please read on. Let's start with the basics. Holding positions during war is necessary to ensure defense, gain tactical advantages, and wear down the enemy. Prolonged holding of positions weakens the opponent through constant battles and forces them into exhausting attacks. There are, of course, various ways of doing this. Holding a line and then doing maneuver warfare, where you maneuver in an area. So you're trying to hold an area instead of specific positions. So in the area, you're doing maneuver warfare to hold the area, but it's kind of the same thing, isn't it? Just different approaches to the same basic concept. Holding territory and denying the enemy a chance to advance. Anyway. Moving on. Defending populated areas with industrial buildings and prepared positions is always much more effective than in open fields. Very true. So this before drone warfare was a thing. You usually said that you needed a 10-to-1 advantage. I've repeated this in ad nauseum. A 10-to-1 advantage to overcome the enemy in an urban environment. Going up against trenches and fortified positions, bunkers, foxholes, you would need a 5-to-1 advantage because you would take many more casualties pushing into those areas. And you need to be able to have troops alive to engage the enemy and kill them and win the battles. So you need 5-to-1 against trenches, 10-to-1 in an urban area. And out in the woods, in a meeting engagement, you would try to have a 3-to-1 to be able to outmaneuver, outgun, and take casualties and win the fight. So defending populated areas with industrial buildings is much more effective because the enemy needs at minimum a 10-to-1 advantage. That is why calls for the voluntary abandonment of Pokrovsk and Mironard can only come from degenerates and Russians. Yes, that is why we were so early to identify Pokrovsk and Mironard as this massive defensive hub for the Ukrainians, and why we've said for so long this is where Ukraine wants to fight, because in these twin cities they have all the advantages, right? Russia has 0 advantages within the cities. Leaving these cities entails the risk of pushing defensive lines back by tens of kilometers. We're gonna return to that though. Slight disagreement, but still, the basic statement is still true, as there would be no stable defensive line capable of stopping the enemy's advance. We'll return to this, but yeah, basically yes, but not in this case. There are backup plans here. Historically, populated areas, especially large cities, often served as such lines. Therefore, any decision about retreat must be made considering long-term consequences and plans for their subsequent liberation. We also remind you disclosing detailed information about military political decisions is dangerous and contradictory, I think. It's like all the maps showing Ukrainian defensive lines. I mean, it's out there. You can't stop it. The Russians are gathering the intelligence on their own, and all you need to do is purchase satellite images from private companies, and you can spot all the trenches and what have you within Ukraine and on Russian-controlled territory. But essentially, you just want to talk about this. Consider what that is when you're actively looking for where, in this case, Ukraine is building their defensive line, and then sharing that online to everyone, including the enemy. How the hell is that not espionage? I mean, you're gathering critical information about a nation's defense during an active war and then providing it to the enemy. Yes, you're sharing it to everyone, absolutely, but you're still providing it to the enemy, and you're offering up your theories and insights on your findings in Twitter links and posts and discussions and what have you. I mean, it's espionage. It's you're disclosing critical military strategy to the enemy of Ukraine. It's mind-boggling. Anyway, which is why whenever I use those maps, I wait months. So they've been out and about in months. So I don't do, this is just fresh. Recently taken images of Ukrainian trenches. I will not use those in my videos. For fuck's sake. Anyway, moving on. Discussion about the effectiveness or risks of the decision, talking about Pokrovsk Mironard here again, is important, but should not be turned into political PR or hype. And this is awesome. We invite all commentators, you know who, and those who know better, you know who, to join the general staff or to join our assault units who hold and counterattack the enemy, not with words, but with deeds. In other words, you know who, Shut the fuck up, right? Thankfully, though, since I agree with this and I have said all of this for months and months and months, I hope I don't have to join the assault units. I hope they're fine with that, since I agree with this and have repeated this for quite some time. Huh? Vatniks, I've said this for quite some time. Look, they agree with me. Annoying, isn't it? I love it. Anyway, moving on. And now with this in mind, take a look at this. This happened a couple of days ago. First this statement by Deep State, and then 48 hours later, Noble Report reported this. So first, this was released yesterday. The enemy conducted 100 assault actions on the Pokrovsk sector. This fact indicates that the enemy is trying to speed up and spares no reserves. From understanding, during the entire year of 2025, there were only more attacks, as it were, on May the 3rd and 4th, namely 113 and 115 assault actions, respectively. So a huge uptick in Russian activity a couple of days ago, where they were just throwing everything they had at Pokrovsk. And then, 48 hours later, we had this. Russians have reduced their activity in Pokrovsk and limited movements, trying to cut losses as they wait for reinforcements. And then you add this towards the end, there are several attempts to infiltrate Ryzhne disguised as civilians were stopped. And near Nerd situation remains tense. So evidently Russia just threw everything they had at Pokrovsk in a huge, massive assault, after which things calmed down because they lost some steam and then had to build up momentum again and continue those attacks. So evidently Pokrovsk is a massive issue. Myrnorad is a massive issue for the Russians. They're having enormous trouble punching into these two cities. And now some rumors, I guess. I'm not sure how accurate this is. I mean, I'm just putting it out there, and make of this what you will. I'm not saying this is true. I'm just saying this claim exists. So Jay in Kiev is a YouTuber, Ukrainian, and he's, understandably made a thing of this war and reporting on it on YouTube. And according to this claim, he has a friend who was in Pokrovsk recently as a reporter, and this is what's being claimed. Russians are literally doing the Stalingrad strategy or whatever. Never mind that. This here. And all the shock assault troops are on some kind of stimulant. And many are foaming at the mouth and talking nonsense. And then the elite troops are ordered to kill any that return. Make of this what you will. I'm not saying this is true. I'm just putting it out there that this is what's being said, which might explain why the Russians are dying in such numbers, because they're just rushing into enemy fire without thinking. Not unreasonable considering the huge casualty figures that we're seeing. So yeah, that's make of it what you will. So not all that many updates. Andrew Perpetua, though, he has an update down here. We're going to take a look at this. But we're going to start off in the north and work our way down into Pokrovsk. So we know that the Ukrainians have kept repeating that the Dobropilya direction is an issue. Dobropilya is up here. And I suppose it's this pocket here, or this Russian presence here. The Shakova pocket is under control. Ukraine has pushed the Russians back east of Shakova, even though Russia managed to push into Volodymyrivka in the end. But we are having reports that Ukraine is pushing towards Boykivka from the south, and that they're also trying to establish control in Mayak. And should they achieve this, then you have another pocket here in the Boykivka pocket, which a bunch of isolated Russians, because at Boykivka you have a bridge And if you push in here, then the Russians are cut off, and you have, like we said, another pocket. And this is what the Ukrainians are trying to do. Mirnorad, Russia is launching assaults in the north and northeast. They have entered the city. They've tried to push across this open field. Didn't work. I mean, we even made a point of it when they first pushed into Balahan, that if they were to try and assault across here, they would be doomed. And that is what happened. Then we saw another push through here. Unclear if they made it into town, but they made it out here at least. And before they got destroyed in between these positions and the town. Not much happening down here. Now we're going to move down to the interesting part here, where Andrew Perpetua now has all of this as contested. This has been firmly in Ukrainian hands for the longest of time. Now, we're not seeing it on any other map, I think. Andrew is the only one that shows this on the maps that I usually look at. And according to him, this is now contested. I expected this to happen eventually. It is on the far reaches of Ukrainians on the Ukrainian lines. It's difficult to move in supplies and what have you. And it was only a matter of time before they either fell back or Russia pushed in and cut them off and isolated them. Why this is happening now, I don't know. I don't know if Ukraine abandoned positions and moved back, or if they were forced back, or if Russia cut in behind them, trapped them, and overran them. Don't know. But it is contested on Andrew Perpetua's map. This is actually an issue I was going to talk about. If this, before I knew that this was a thing, I was going to mention this part of the battlefield. What happens if Ukraine is pushed back, since people have been worried about Sukyar and the positions down here for so long. If Russia comes up in the middle here, it opens up new avenues of approach into town. They can now put pressure on Mirnorad from the east and from the west and from the south. So holding down here kept the Russians away from Mirnorad. Now, potentially, the Russians can move all the way up to the outskirts of Mirnorad. The thing is, though, they need to get past these trenches. I'm talking about the espionage and these trenches before they can push into town, right? I need to adjust the lines here. I haven't done that yet. Yeah, but espionage. So you have the lines here, the fortifications here. So just because Russians are here doesn't mean they are going to run into town. They still need to overcome Ukrainian trenches in the area. But if they are up here, that it is an issue. It gives them more options into pushing into Mirnorad and put strain on Ukrainian defensive lines in the city. Technically, you shorten your defensive lines for Ukraine. You can now amass troops here much more densely and potentially have a stronger defensive line. Sure, but I mean the Russians are at the moment just right now outside of the city instead of a couple of kilometers south of it. Right? You get what I'm getting at. Russia can now also begin trying to push through here in reaching Rivne, Svitle, and being able to cut in and assault the supplies leading through these two smaller towns into Mirnorad through this gap. So if Russia can push up here, I mean, yes, they're exposed, they're surrounded, and going to take shots from every angle, but they can begin pushing up towards these two smaller towns, communities, and that could be really problematic. I mean, yes, they are up here, but if they can come up here, then we're really talking about Mirnorad being cut off and isolated. I don't think that's going to happen tomorrow, maybe in a couple of weeks, maybe a month or two away. We'll see. Now, moving on to Pokrovsk. Rishne, they were talking about Rishne, where Russians were trying to infiltrate, were dressed up as civilians, so probably happened down here. This is where Russia can sneak through, come up here along the roads and sneak through the wooded areas and what have you. So I marked it out just to remember it, that this is where they're trying to sneak in with civilian clothing. So, Pokrovsk and what Korn Group said and what the Ukrainians have officially announced and what have you. Moving on the flanks, we're seeing it on the other mappers where they're geolocating Ukrainian soldiers. Pushing in on the flanks to open up logistics, white arrows. And they keep repeating that there's only 300 to 400 Russians operating within Pokrovsk itself. So that's encouraging. That means north of the railroad, it should be relatively easy for the Ukrainians to secure territory. South might still be an issue. I'm still thinking that there is some truth to the mappers indicating that the Russians are pushing up and securing territory. I think the main battlefront is somewhere along this main street here, the E50 highway that cuts through town. This is probably where you have a more traditional front line between forces. We know that the Russians are pushing in, assaulting and getting countered by Ukrainians. So I think this is where the main front line is, where you see the most action between Ukrainian and Russian forces. And then behind is where you have these ambush units sneaking around, calling in artillery, ambushing Ukrainian logistics or troops trying to move forward and what have you. But what the Russians are claiming, that they have the entirety of town under control, is complete fantasy. That's not what's happening. On their maps, what they're doing is they make no distinction between controlled, contested, and infiltrated territory. So they just mark everything as under Russian control. So here, Russian control, contested territory, combined with infiltrated territory, they just show it all as Russian. And that, makes Vatniks believe that, they are in control of the entire town, when in fact, the front line is down here by this highway, this main street. And north of it, you have contested territory where they're sneaking in, where they have a majority of their infiltration units trying to saturate the city. And then north of the railroad, we have few and far between infiltration units sneaking around and currently trying to avoid being hunted down by Ukrainian special forces. So that is the situation on Pokrovsk at the moment. Not sure what else to add. At the moment, the Russians are still in Rodinsky. Ukraine can't seem to push them out, unfortunately. Russia has made some gains here, just north of Mirnorod. Trying to push in with motorbikes and what have you. See how that plays out. But they've made some attacks in the north. But yeah, that's about it, I think. I mean, the big news is Ukraine more than likely abandoning Sukyar to tighten their defensive line along the railroad here, more than likely. Makes sense. We were expecting this. We were waiting for this to happen. But we still need to keep this in mind. This does bring Russia all the more closer to Mirnorod and Pokrovsk, giving them other angles of attack into both cities. And they can probably try and make a push up here in the center to reach Rivne Svitle from the south. I think they might have a better chance of reaching it from the south compared to coming in from the north. Just a gut feeling. We'll see. We'll see if I'm right or not on that one. Anything else to add? I don't know. Is there? Well, quite clearly, the defense here is working out. It's a battle, so it's not fun and games. People are dying. The enemy will make moves that work in their favor. They will claim territory. They will come up with new tactics and what have you to overcome your plans and stuff like that. We're seeing it all in this area from both sides. And but quite clearly, Russia's struggling establishing control in the southern end of, or the southern half of town, and the Ukrainians are more or less in control of the northern half. They just need to clear up these small infiltration units that are a nuisance. 300 to 400 Russians within Pokrovsk, according to official Ukrainian statements. Oh yeah, we were going to talk about the defenses behind Pokrovsk and Myrnorod. Yeah, we're going to talk about that briefly. Right, so what the Corn Group said in their statement was absolutely correct, that if you abandon positions willy-nilly without a plan, there's a risk that you're going to get pushed back since the enemy gains momentum. They're going to follow you and try and push you back. It's kind of like if you imagine armies back in the day, medieval warfare, where you line up, you march up. You don't run up, you march up in formation and start duking it out. And if one side then begins to falter and shit, we're losing, they begin to fall back. And then the enemy, they feel that, hey, we're pushing them back, we're following, we're pushing them, and you're pushing them over. They're tripping, your friends are getting killed as they trip it over and stuff like that. You're getting harassed on the flanks by cavalry. Some cavalry units might actually come in behind you and harass your rear lines and what have you. And then, as you then begin to fall back, the enemy keeps pushing after you. They could actually force you into a rout. And then you flee and leave the battlefield running. And then that's when the enemy sends in their shock troops, cavalry, knights on horseback, run you down and hack you down as you're trying to run away from horses. It's generally not a good situation. And that is kind of what the Corn Group was aiming for there. So you're holding here, shit, we're going to lose, or we're about to lose here, better fall back fast as hell. The enemy, they have momentum, they follow you, so where are you going to set up defenses if they're going to follow you? They're going to overrun you as you're trying to set up new defenses, stuff like that. However, this is not the case here, because the Ukrainians have planned for this battle for 1 or 2 years, basically. So all logistics leading into Pokrovsk and Myrnorod come through this wedge shape here. And what does this represent? A thick cluster of trenches, bunkers, and fortifications. Ukraine has fortified the entire area between the E50 highway and Dobropilya. This is where all the logistics leading into Pokrovsk are coming through. They have fortified that shit like you wouldn't believe. So if you have to fall back from these two cities, and the Russians are going to push north because they want the Donbass, then they're going to have to go to Dobropilya, and then they're going to have to fight their way through this entire cluster of trench works. Right? It's not going to be any smooth, easy ride for the Russians. And behind Dobropilya in itself is going to be another Pokrovsk, and the Russians have been at Pokrovsk for a year, still haven't taken it. They've barely entered into Myrnorod, and then they're going to have to do it all over at Dobropilya, right? They haven't taken Shakove, and they have barely secured a couple of blocks within the small town of Rodinsky. So Dobropilya is not going to be fun. They're going to spend another year at Dobropilya like they've done at Pokrovsk. So first they're going to have to suffer how many thousands of casualties taking Pokrovsk and Myrnorod, then suffer thousands of casualties trying to push through this area, and then have another Pokrovsk at Dobropilya. And then, behind that, you have, like we've said, the Syrsky line, with a huge defensive hub up here. So, I mean, if Ukraine has prepared for the day they need to abandon Pokrovsk and Myrnorod. They're going to fall back, defend this area here in yellow, and then the Russians are going to follow them all the way up to Dobropilya, and then we're going to have another Pokrovsk situation up here. And then what? When the Russians have taken Dobropilya, then what? Then they have to secure this thick, massive defensive hub here, right next to Dobropilya. I mean, it is, the Ukrainians have planned for this for ages and built up a solid defensive structure here in this area.
So that's why when Pokrovsk eventually falls, it's not that big of a deal for the defense of Ukraine. The longer they can hold on, the more damage they can inflict. So it's important to hold Pokrovsk for that reason. But losing it at this stage will not have such a huge impact militarily on Ukraine because they have prepared everything they need to prepare behind it. It's going to be a political and propaganda win for the Russians if they take Pokrovsk. They can use this victory to spin the pro-Russian narrative. But if you know the details, how costly it has been, how it has slowed down the advance along the entire front because they're pushing in everything they have in the Russian army essentially to this small battlefield, then you realize what a huge failure this is for the Russians and what a massive strategical victory it's been for the Ukrainians, the defense of Pokrovsk and Mirnorad. And it's not over. You have, like I said, the defensive area here and then Dobropelia behind all of that. So this is not over by any means, even if Pokrovsk falls. So in this case, that statement made by Korn, I think, is a bit misleading because in this case, the Ukrainians have prepared in absurdum behind Pokrovsk and Mirnorad for the day they have to leave, and then they are ready for the Russians, and then they can defend this entire area, knowing that they can fall back to Dobropelia, and then knowing they can fall back to the Syrsky line. I mean, the casualties Russia suffered at Pokrovsk, it's only going to get worse behind Pokrovsk, and Dobropelia is going to be... will they have the manpower to keep pushing? And when? Is it 2028? It's just... this war has been a huge disaster for the Russians, especially the battle at Pokrovsk and Mirnorad. A massive failure for the Russians. And the Ukrainians have done excellent work in grinding the Russians down at Pokrovsk and Mirnorad.
And holy hell, I've been talking for well over a half hour. Jesus. Okay, we need to wrap this up. God damn it. Also, we have also this from Syrsky on the defense of Pokrovsk. There are plans B and C for all scenarios. We just gone through them. They have clearly prepared for the day Pokrovsk and Mirnorad will fall. They know that eventually these two cities will fall. Right? They're not going to hold them indefinitely. No one's claimed it. The Ukrainians believe that the Russians will take them. The point is to get the most out of the twin cities and inflict as many casualties as you possibly can in an area where the Ukrainians have the advantage, where the Russians must have at minimum a 10-1 advantage to push in and succeed. And the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of Ukraine assures that the Russians have only slipped through in a few places through engineering obstacles, and the situation is under control. I guess he has to say that the situation is under control. But, we are seeing huge numbers of geolocated Ukrainians here in the eastern part of town. And meanwhile, we're seeing that drone strikes keep happening. But we have a lot of Ukrainians geolocated here, where the Russians say they have control. But, it's just ridiculous, to be perfectly honest. And we know that the Ukrainians are moving in elite operators to secure the flanks and open up the logistical routes. That in itself is an admission that the Russians have pushed in and that they are attacking logistics and that they have a presence and that they are a problem. Absolutely. But they keep maintaining it's only 300, 400. And that means it's an issue that you can solve with enough troops, with enough aggression, and with enough persistence, right? So, where was I going with it? I had something clever to say and I've forgotten it because it's the middle of the night here. brilliant. But yeah, I think it's a fair representation. The entirety of the town is more than likely contested, since you have the Russian groups sneaking around everywhere. But I think the actual front line is down here where the heavy fighting is going on, and north here is where Russians are sneaking around, and you have the occasional firefights as the Russians are opening fire or as they're being discovered by elite operators from Ukraine. We need to end this. This is taking far too long, and I'm tired, and I'm trying to put together sentences that make some sense, and I'm failing at the moment. So yeah, I hope this made some sense. I hope you understand better the official Ukrainian standpoint. That doesn't necessarily mean it's what they feel, think, and what they plan behind closed doors, but officially this is what they're saying, and this is why they're holding on to Pokrovsk Milnorad, and they clearly have planned for this battle for a long time, and it is clear that this triangle between Mirnorad, Pokrovsk, and Dobropilya, this is where they intend to inflict huge numbers of casualties on the Russians. But anyway, ranting and going on for far too long, let's end the video. So, as always, go på marsch, Ukraine, and give them hell.
Out on the wide plains, shadow thick as coal. The eastern wind howls, it cuts through my soul. A saber in my hand, a heartbeat of steel. I face the beast from the darkness unreal. Claws like knives, tearing through the night. Blood on the soul, but I hold tight. The bear rolls loud, I won't let it land. This is my ground, the Cossack stand. Shakes heavy with each beastly stride. Eyes like embers, it can't be denied. Fangs bared wide like a pit of despair. Well, my saber sings and slices the air. For my family, my land, my right. I'll bleed dry, I'll give the fight. Claws like knives tearing through the night. Blood on the soul, but I hold tight. The bear rolls loud, I won't let it land. This is my ground, the Cossack stand. Struck me down, tore me deep, but my fire burns, won't let me sleep. Through the pain, through the ache, the bear will fall for freedom's sake. Through the night, blood on the soul, but I hold tight. The bear roars loud, I won't let is my ground, the Cossacks stand.